Morning, kids. Boris Johnson is no longer an MP. This guy is gone from being Prime Minister and winning one of the biggest parliamentary majorities in UK election history to no longer being an MP, to having to leave his job because he broke the law and got found guilty of lying about it. He's managed to go from the top of politics to the bottom of politics in 3.5 years. Now, I know we shouldn't celebrate like he's finished for good because he's Boris Johnson after all, and
you always come back.
But after what this man has done to this country, I think we owe it to ourselves to savor the moment. Because unless there were some literal skeletons in his closet, that man is never going to jail, so we're never actually going to get real justice against Boris Johnson. So given that this man deliberately supported a Brexit that he knew would harm millions of people across the country, just in pursuit of his lifelong goal of power that he's had ever since he was a kid and dreamed of becoming world king, watching him get effectively thrown out of office and losing the power that he's dreamed of his entire life might be the only kind of justice we ever get to see. Basically, the Parliament's Privileges Committee came back with the verdict that Boris Johnson was deliberately lying to Parliament when he said that no parties occurred in Downing Street during lockdown. And so Boris Johnson, realising that even though the majority of MPs are Tories, they would still vote to accept that verdict, and so he was like,
now I'm panicking.
Don't panic.
No, I am, because I'm going to lose my job.
And so he jumped before he was pushed. But of course, because he is after all the mutated clone of Donald Trump, he released a statement calling it a witch hunt, conspiracy, a bunch of haters just trying to attack him because of how much winning he's doing. He said it was a Remainer plot to reverse Brexit by taking revenge on him. He complained that we weren't doing enough to make a success of Brexit, even though he was the Prime Minister for 2/3 of the time that we've been out of the EU. He even went so far as to imply that if he was still in charge, we'd have a trade deal with the US. Forgetting, of course, the fact that Biden hates his guts. But at least for now, he's gone. And we don't need to talk today about the damage that he's done to the UK economy via Brexit or the lives that he's cost by his mishandling of the pandemic. I want to talk about what he's done to British society. Because there are many families and friendships that will simply never heal from the political divisions that Boris Johnson has ripped apart since 2016. Because what he did was take one half of the country, his half, and get them to believe that the other half was trying to give away their country's freedom, trap them in poverty after years of austerity, and endanger their lives by depriving the NHS of much needed cash. All while knowing that he was turning them against people who he knew were actually right. Because in 2013 he said,
I'd vote to stay in the single market. I'm in favour of the single market. I want us to be able to trade freely with our European friends and partners.
So he knew in 2013 that leaving the EU single market would make it harder to trade with our European friends and partners, which by definition means it would create trade barriers, yet in 2016 he said,
All those who say that there would be barriers to trade with Europe if we were to do a Brexit. It is totally and utterly absurd.
And then he constantly implied that anybody who opposed his version of Brexit was betraying the country, using violent language like Surrender Act, traitors, suicide vest, even comparing the EU to the Nazis to make people feel like we were at war. And because I was one of the people trying to stop Brexit, I witnessed the anger that he was stirring up in people firsthand.
They're fucking traitor. Fucking traitor. Yeah. Fuck off, you traitor. Fuck off.
Alright, lad, thank you very much. Enjoy the match. Enjoy the match. Enjoy the match. Trying to
Mate, you voted leave, except we voted leave. Fucking idiot.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And he didn't care. He'd already seen that kind of anger lead to the death of Jo Cox, and yet he told the MP who took over from Jo Cox that if she didn't want to get murdered, she needed to support Brexit. And he was happy to cause a 375% increase in hate crimes against Muslim women after he compared them to bank robbers. And he refused to apologise, just like he refused to apologise for calling gay people tank top bum boys, or calling black people pickaninnies with watermelon smiles. And because he was lying, Remainers on our side ended up seeing people on the other side as if they were the ones lying to us as well. Because after all, they did vote for his agenda. See, the man ripped apart the fabric of British society, but it's the trust in politics that I want to touch on last. Because when I'm explaining to Remain voters why people voted to leave, I tell them a story. I say, imagine you're 50 years old and you live in Sunderland or Redcar or Hull or Swansea. And when you were 11, your dad lost his job because Margaret Thatcher closed the shipyards or the mines. And so you voted Labour your entire life because you hate the Tories, but nothing ever gets better. Because Labour knows they're always going to win in your area, and the Tories know they're never going to win, so neither party has any incentive to help you. Meanwhile, London gets more investment every year, the Millennium Dome, the London Eye, the Elizabeth Line, and that is what the Leave campaign tapped into. People who knew they were not getting their fair share. People who were never going to side with David Cameron after he just put their family through 6 years of austerity. People who came out and voted in 2016 for the first time in years because they saw Brexiteers like Boris Johnson as their last hope. And Boris Johnson took that hope, used it to make himself Prime Minister, knowing that it would make those same people even poorer. And like I said, the man should be in jail, because if I lied on my taxes and deprived the country of, say, £1,000, I would be in jail. This man lies and deprives the country of £100 billion a year. The only suits that man should be wearing are for the occasional appeal, where the judge simply laughs at him and sends him back to prison. But being booted out of office in disgrace for being a liar and being publicly humiliated will have to do for now. So I know that I'm gonna have a great week.